When security expert Rafael discovered that tech CEO Isabella had been kidnapped, he didn't just save her life, he unlocked a friendship that would change everything. What happened next will restore your faith in humanity. Before we get into the story, let us know in the comments, what's the kindest thing a stranger has ever done for you? The fluorescent lights of the downtown parking garage cast harsh shadows across Rafael's weathered face as he adjusted his security guard uniform one more time. At 38, he carried the quiet dignity of a man who'd learned to make peace with life's unexpected turns. The divorce papers in his glove compartment were 6 months old, but the sting of starting over as a single father still felt fresh. His daughter Emma, only 7 years old, was his entire world now, and the reason he worked double shifts at the corporate security firm. Rafael had a secret, though. Before life pulled him in different directions, before marriage and fatherhood and bills piled up like autumn leaves, he'd been something else entirely. Elite military intelligence, search and rescue operations. Skills that felt like they belonged to someone else's life now. These days, his biggest challenge was making sure corporate executives got safely to their cars and that his daughter had everything she needed. That Tuesday evening started like any other. Rafael was doing his final rounds when he noticed something off about the executive parking level. Isabella Moreau's silver Tesla was still there, unusual since the CEO of Tech Vision Solutions typically left by 6. The 34-year-old had built her company from a college dorm room idea into a billion-dollar empire. But despite her success, she was known for treating security staff with genuine respect. She always remembered names, asked about families, and never acted like the staff was invisible. A chill ran down Rafael's spine. Something felt wrong, really wrong. He approached the vehicle slowly, his old instincts kicking in. The driver's door was slightly ajar, and there were scuff marks on the concrete nearby. Rafael's heart began to pound as he noticed Isabella's phone on the ground, its screen cracked but still glowing with missed calls. This wasn't right. Isabella was meticulous. She would never leave her phone behind. "Think, Rafael," he whispered to himself, his mind racing back to techniques he hadn't used in years. He studied the scene like he was reading a story written in details others might miss. The scuff marks led toward the service elevator, the one that connected to the loading dock. His pulse quickened as he realized what he was looking at. This was an abduction. Most security guards would have called the police immediately, but Rafael's training told him something different. In kidnapping situations, the first few hours were critical. Police protocols meant procedures, paperwork, questions, precious time that Isabella might not have. His military experience whispered a harsh truth. Sometimes the system moved too slowly to save lives. Rafael's hands shook as he pulled out his phone, not to call 911, but to access the building's security system remotely, a skill he'd picked up during his intelligence days. His fingers moved across the screen with muscle memory he'd tried to forget. Within minutes, he'd traced the service elevator's usage and found what he was looking for. A dark van leaving the loading dock just 40 minutes earlier. The security cameras had captured enough of the license plate for Rafael to run a quick search through databases he technically shouldn't have had access to anymore. But desperate times called for old connections and favors he'd never thought he'd need to cash in. What he discovered made his blood run cold. The van was registered to a shell company with ties to corporate espionage. This wasn't random. Someone wanted Isabella for her company's secrets, or worse, as leverage against Tech Vision Solutions. Rafael stood in that empty parking garage, faced with a choice that would define everything. He could follow protocol, call the authorities, and hope for the best. Or he could trust skills he'd spent years trying to leave behind and do what he knew how to do, find people who didn't want to be found. He thought about Emma sleeping peacefully at his sister's house, trusting that Daddy would come home safe like he always did. He thought about the stable, quiet life he'd built for them both. And then he thought about Isabella, somewhere out there, probably terrified, counting on someone to care enough to look for her. The old Rafael, the one who'd saved lives in impossible situations, quietly stepped forward. Using techniques he'd hoped never to need again, Rafael began tracking the van's likely route. His fingers flew over his phone, cross-referencing traffic patterns, known safe houses, and the psychology of amateur kidnappers who were probably in over their heads. Within an hour, he'd narrowed down 3 possible locations where they might have taken her. The first location was a bust, an abandoned warehouse that showed no signs of recent activity. But as Rafael approached the second location, a remote cabin about 40 minutes outside the city, every instinct he possessed started screaming that he'd found the right place. 2 cars parked behind the cabin, lights on in the back room. And there, through a grimy window, he caught a glimpse of Isabella tied to a chair, looking exhausted but unharmed. Rafael's training kicked in completely now. This wasn't just about being a hero, it was about being smart. He called 911, but he also knew that by the time backup arrived, the situation could have changed dramatically. These kidnappers were amateurs, which made them unpredictable and potentially dangerous. Moving like a ghost through the darkness, Rafael used every skill from his military days to approach the cabin unseen. What he overheard through the thin walls confirmed his worst fears. The kidnappers were planning to move Isabella to a second location within the hour. If she disappeared again, finding her might be impossible. Sometimes kindness means making the hardest choice of all. Rafael disabled the cabin's power with a precision that surprised even him. In the confusion that followed, he managed to create enough chaos to untie Isabella and guide her safely out of the building before the kidnappers even realized what was happening. Years of training condensed into 10 minutes of perfect execution. But as they reached his car, Isabella collapsed from exhaustion and fear. She looked up at Rafael with tears in her eyes and whispered, "You came for me. I didn't think anyone would come." In that moment, Rafael realized something profound. He'd spent 2 years believing his old life was a burden, something to leave behind. But tonight, those skills had saved an innocent person's life. Maybe the things we try to forget about ourselves are sometimes exactly what the world needs us to remember. The police arrived just as Rafael was getting Isabella to safety. The kidnappers were arrested without incident. 3 desperate men who'd thought kidnapping a CEO would solve their financial problems. They'd had no idea what they were really dealing with, and frankly, neither had Rafael until tonight. At the hospital, as doctors checked Isabella over and police took statements, she kept asking about Rafael. Not about the investigation, not about her company's security protocols, but about the quiet security guard who'd risked everything to save a stranger. "You have a daughter," she said when they finally had a moment to talk privately. "Emma, right? 7 years old?" Rafael nodded. Surprised, she remembered. "She's my whole world." Isabella smiled, and for the first time since the ordeal began, it reached her eyes. "You know, I built Tech Vision because I wanted to create something that mattered, something that helped people. But I think I lost sight of what that really means along the way." What Isabella did next changed everything. She didn't just offer Rafael a reward, she offered him a job. Not as a security guard, but as head of corporate security, using skills he'd never thought would matter in the business world. More than that, she wanted to create a scholarship program for single parents pursuing education, starting with a fund that would ensure Emma had every opportunity Rafael could dream of for her. But the most unexpected part came 3 months later. Isabella had quietly investigated Rafael's background and learned about his military service, his struggle with single parenthood, and his decision to leave his career behind for Emma's stability. She realized that Rafael represented something she'd lost in her climb to success, the understanding that real strength comes from sacrifice, not ambition. Isabella established the Guardian Angel Foundation, a nonprofit that helped single parents develop their skills while supporting their children's education. Rafael became the foundation's first success story, but more importantly, he became Isabella's reminder that leadership isn't about climbing higher, it's about lifting others up. The ripple effects were extraordinary. The foundation helped dozens of families in its first year. Rafael's new position allowed him to provide Emma with opportunities he'd only dreamed of, while his military experience made Tech Vision's security protocols the industry standard. But beyond all the professional success, something even more beautiful developed. Isabella and Rafael became the kind of friends who change each other's perspectives on life. She learned about the quiet heroism of everyday sacrifice from watching Rafael parent Emma. He learned about using success as a tool for helping others from watching Isabella transform her business philosophy. Emma, shy at first, eventually started calling Isabella Aunt Bella. And Isabella, who'd never thought she had time for children, discovered that some of life's greatest joys come from watching a 7-year-old learn to believe in herself. A year later, at the Foundation's first annual gala, Rafael stood on stage looking out at hundreds of families whose lives had been touched by kindness that started with one person caring enough to act. Emma sat in the front row, beaming with pride at her dad, wearing a dress that Isabella had helped her pick out for the special occasion. Sometimes, Rafael said into the microphone, his voice steady with hard-won wisdom, the bravest thing we can do is trust that our story isn't over yet. That the skills we think we've outgrown, the dreams we think we've lost, the connections we think are impossible, they're all just waiting for the right moment to remind us who we're meant to be. Isabella wiped away a tear from the side of the stage, remembering the terrified woman who'd been rescued by a security guard who turned out to be so much more. The man who taught her that real success isn't measured in stock prices or market share, but in the lives you touch and the courage you inspire in others. The Guardian Angel Foundation went on to help over 1,000 families in its first 3 years. Raphael's daughter Emma grew up knowing that kindness and courage aren't separate qualities. They're two parts of the same choice to care about others even when it's difficult. And Rafael? He learned that sometimes the most profound transformations come not from leaving our past behind, but from discovering how our experiences can serve others in ways we never imagined. What did you think of Rafael and Isabella's story? Share your thoughts in the comments, and tell us about a time when kindness changed your life. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring tales that remind us what's possible when strangers choose to care for each other.